Get your calendars out. February 17th, February 18th, live trading, San Diego. We got the Lowe's Coronado. I mean, what else would you want? This event is limited to 50 people. Look at your calendar, clear it, make sure you show up. If you want to be a rebel, this is the place to be. You got to sign up for it now. Giddy up, baby.
Bang.
Where's the snapper?
I left it back in Chicago, Pete.
Oh,
so you won't be bothered with it for about 2 weeks. Because I'll be down in Puerto Rico for the next couple weeks. We leave this evening. And for all of you bears out there, I wore my Dow 22 Thou hat. Just because I don't think we're going to see it again.
We could.
But we could.
Mike Wilson says we could.
Mike Wilson. Dang. Yeah. Hey, folks, you are tuned into the Rebel's Edge. He's Pete Najarian. I'm John Najarian, the better-looking brother. And we've got Nick Hill handling the board today. Thank you, Nick Hill. It's going to be a fun ride. We got a lot to talk about. As you guys know, we always start off with the macro minute. 1 minute of macro is all we shove down your throats.
That's it. We don't want to bore you.
As opposed to most of the networks that want to spend their entire time with you talking about macro, about the height of Jay Powell's lifts in his shoes or whatever it might be.
The size of the briefcase, the shoes, the tie, everything other than something that can make you money.
That's right. And this won't necessarily make you money, but I was lucky enough when I was out with the family in New York last night, Pete. And like most cities, it's fairly deserted for Christmas because everybody goes out to the country and all that kind of stuff. But I was lucky enough that I had a fan of you and me come up to me and say, hey, I'd like, would it be okay if I got a picture with you? And I said, of course, that'd be great. And turns out he's Fred Luddy, the CEO, the founder, former CEO and founder of ServiceNow, Pete. It's always fun when any fan wants to come up and say thanks for what you guys do. But when a billionaire entrepreneur comes up to you, it does feel pretty good. So, Fred, thank you very much. Thanks for watching as well. All right, Pete, I'm throwing it to you for the macro 10 seconds.
All right, the macro 10 seconds. Keep an eye on these Chinese names. And the reason I say that is that includes the American Chinese names. That includes Wynn. That includes Las Vegas Sands. A lot of other companies that are in that world and their revenue are coming from China. That's a huge thing. And that's something I think you want to keep an eye on. We're seeing that open up. And we're going to talk more about that right now.
Exactly. Because every day on this show, folks, we cover for you 4 stocks or topics that we think are things you need to pay attention to and what we're doing with them. We don't just talk about them, but we've been talking about FXI, which is, of course, the Chinese big cap index. And this one, Pete, we've had numerous hits on it for unusual activity. There you see on your screen how many times it has hit lately for unusual call buying. So when the FXI or any index is hitting that many times, we like to pay attention to it. It's now up over 4 1/3% today, trading 29. Bang.
Well, and you know, John, it's interesting because of the fact that you talk about the FXI and we're talking about the big piece. It's basically their version of, call it the S&P, whatever you want to focus on. But it is amazing to see because we're talking about the business-friendly side of China now. Now they're starting to wake up and smell the coffee. They're trying to figure out this whole zero COVID and all the mistakes that they've probably made. But how do they start to get past that? Morgan Stanley, December 5th, and it's not that long ago, came out and actually upgraded their position on what they thought of China, and they moved it to an overweight. I think that's a big key factor, John, because as we're seeing this go and as we're starting to see them make moves that are going to absolutely reopen the country finally, as long as they stick to their word, which we don't really trust them that much. So I wouldn't stick to that. But if they do, this is part of what they need to do because they want stimulus. They need the economy to start moving again because they have absolutely come to a screeching halt and they need to start up. And that's exactly what we're seeing today.
Yep. And the news today is that by the 8th of January, they're reopening the application process. So the Chinese will be able to travel. US and the rest of the world will also be able to go back into China, visit relatives, or just visit it for the first time. There are some caveats. We can talk about those later. But basically, this is a very positive step. Pete's right. It's going to affect LVS. It's going to affect WYNN, WYNN, and of course, all the Chinese stocks like Billy, BILI, and Alibaba, everything. All right, Pete, let's talk for a second about NIO, because this is tied to it too, because this is a Chinese EV maker and it's down. And it's not the only EV maker that's down. And many people are scratching their heads over this one, but the Chinese COVID breakdown is one of the reasons that they don't have the supply chain for all these EV makers. So you'd love to make all the cars you can. Right now, Pete, you can't.
Which is a major problem. Let's be honest. I mean, you just brought it up. You talk about the supply chain. That's been an issue. When you're shut down, that means you're shut down. And that means your supply chain is not there. You can't deliver what you wanted to be able to deliver. So even if they could have, John, they weren't able to do it because of the fact that they just didn't have everything they needed to put together their vehicles. And that's exactly the biggest problem that they had. So when they cut their delivery forecast, they didn't just cut it a little, John. They cut it by about 20% or more. I think they were looking for like 38,000 cars. They actually, or 48,000. It looks like closer to 38,000. So they're definitely pulling back in a big way on what their deliveries will be. And because of that, people are saying, hey, look, if you're not able to deliver, you can't sell the cars. Then what do you got? You got a whole bunch of nothing. And that's why people are saying, you know what, we're going to back off a little bit and wait until the supply chain starts to get back in order and they can start to make some of the deliveries, at least maybe make up some of the delivery time. We'll see how that goes.
Yep, you're absolutely right, Pete. Rivian, XPEV, all of these stocks getting hit today. And another one that's getting hit for the umpteenth day in a row, Pete? Tesla. Yeah. Tesla down. At first it was down 6, then it was down 8. Now it's down 10%. It's trading 113 at mid-session. Now, I put on a call spread last week to take advantage of any kind of recovery that it has between now and the end of January, basically, and then beyond, because I bought the April 125s, Pete, and I was hammering out the January 140s and so forth against it. What I hope is that those go out worthless, the Januaries, and I'm able to keep doing that hammering, but I don't want the stock to keep going down because as smart as I think I am with this trade, it won't work if the stock doesn't cooperate.
No, it's brutal, John. I was looking at a lot of different trades myself in this name. And as a matter of fact, I'm trying to piece it together because I don't think that I have the bottom. I don't know. Whoever thinks that, they're going to probably be wrong. But we certainly have seen the pain that's happened over the last couple of months and year to date. You can see it right there on the screen. Down 65%. It's probably down even a little bit more than that right now. It was down 60% in the last quarter. It's been down 38% in the last month. And today, as you mentioned, John, here we are down about 10%. The problems just keep on lining up, and it's not just about delivery issues, because of the supply chain, Shanghai, and all the rest of it. But let's be honest, we all know that there's also that pressure because of what's going on with the founder, as well as the man who's trying to make as many different jobs going at once as he can, John. Looks like he's going to maybe make a switcheroo at Twitter. That's probably not a bad idea. And maybe the focus can come back to Tesla at some point in time. But I'll tell you, Giga Shanghai, that's an issue. Supplies, that's an issue. And that's something that I think will start to come out of at some point. And I think that's why you're looking now at these levels for something to maybe happen. I have not put on a trade yet. I'm looking for it. When I do, I'll post it up. I'll be happy to show everybody what I do. I just haven't been able to find one that I think makes the most sense for what I'm looking for right now. But the pressure is on, and it's Shanghai. It will start to come back, but it's definitely been on, John.
Yep. Well, and what we're doing also, folks, is when Pete and I are trading options and option spreads, we have a lot less risk than people buying the stock. Because last week it made a nice little, what I thought was a tradable bottom. It wasn't. It bounced from 121 up to 126. That looked good, Pete, but then we pulled right back. And like I said, today, 113. So if you're trading the stock, you're losing a lot of money doing that. But if you're in a call spread, you've already defined how much risk you've got on the table rather than having open-ended risk. All right, Pete, let's talk about Southwest Airlines because this one just hammered today. It was down 2, it was down 4, it's down 6%. Basically, they canceled more flights than any of the other airlines over the holiday weekend. Now, I was stuck in some delays as well. It wasn't weather related, but they couldn't get the pilots. Many of you know that pilots and the flight crews come in from other places. They don't always originate where your flight originates. If they can't get on a flight in Charlotte to get to Chicago, that's a problem. Well, Southwest is down, American and United and Delta and JetBlue. They all had issues, but none of them had issues as big as Southwest.
Yeah, the Southwest issues, John, and obviously they're still trying to figure it all out because they still exist. We're talking about cancellations yesterday, the day before that. And there's a lot of guys that are stranded all over the country right now because of this. And it's not obviously just a Southwest problem, but as you point out, Southwest by far is the leader. We're talking about 60 or 70% of all of their flights being canceled or delayed or whatever. And also seeing a lot of packages going everywhere, John. Some of those suitcases are going to the wrong places. Southwest has always been the airline that's been the friendliest, or at least that's been the thought. And unfortunately, they haven't been so friendly right now during the holiday season. It's been pretty brutal. It's obviously something they're not very proud of. There is some technology going on. There's a lot of different issues. You can't control weather, but you certainly have a better control over some of the technology and some of that where you position yourself and how you take care of people. I can speak firsthand with my daughter who was going to be flying this past before Christmas. They were going to Detroit. That got canceled. They immediately got their money back and they said, you know what? No mas. That's all we wanted to hear. We're done. We'll just make a phone call. So it worked out, but not everybody's able to or willing to do that. So I know there's a lot of headaches out there right now, John, but we don't see those same headaches at Delta and American and United. They somehow were able to skate out underneath a lot of those, and they avoided this whole thing. Southwest right now is the one with the bullseye on.
Yep. Well, and that's not where you want to be. But on the other hand, like Pete said, this is one that customers seem to like because it's not one of those that hits you with a lot of fees after you book your ticket. Right. A lot of the other airlines, unless you're a super high level flyer like Pete and I, you're sitting there, you're getting hit with luggage fees. You're getting hit with a fee if you want to have a certain seat and all that sort of thing. Billions of dollars of fees. All right, let's talk about unusual activity, Pete. Lyft, Lyft. Today we see 50,000 of the January 11 calls being bought for about 50 cents. Now, the previous trade was 50,000 of the January 1250 calls, and they were about 23 cents. Now, whenever Pete and I talk about unusual activity in calls, people think, well, that must mean they think the stock's going up. Not so fast. In this case, my read, Pete, and I bet yours too, is that somebody bought the 1250 calls as protection against a short, and then they rolled down to this strike, the January 11, because they're still worried, but now they can protect even at a lower strike, $1.50 lower, from 1250 down to 11 against a rebound if it happens. I think there's a big short betting that this goes lower.
I totally agree with you, John. I just took a quick look. As a matter of fact, 13 to 17%, depending on what short you want to look at. But either way, when you start to get to double digits, when you're over 10% short, there are some major shorts involved, and they are definitely involved in Lyft. We obviously don't know exactly all the information. We don't have all of that, but it sure makes a lot of sense that you'd want to be able to be a buyer of those calls. It gives you very cheap protection to the upside. If you're short and you're coming down, you just mentioned from the 12s, now you're at the 11s. It sure makes a lot of sense. I think that adds up to something really, really good for the shorts, John. And they've got the protection. If they're wrong and the stock starts to move to the upside, they paid just almost nothing for that protection. So it's a great insurance policy for them. I've got one for you, John, in GDX, and I'm going to the gold miners ETF when I go to GDX. Here's what's really interesting about this one. We don't oftentimes talk about a lot of this, but when you look and you see that there is no, I mean, we still obviously have all kinds of different cryptos out there, right? But obviously that has not really been the trade too that we'd had for a long period of time. Seems like we're starting to see a little bit of those flows go back to the old school names as an alternative. And maybe that's what we're seeing with GDX. People have been buying this for a little while now. Earlier in December, in GLD, we had a buyer of 17,000 of the March 183 calls. At the time, the stock was 165. Now, today, it's 170. It's gone up a little bit. Those calls still have a little bit of time left. It'll be very interesting as you go all the way to March. We could see gold start to make a little bit of a move to the upside, John, if we start feeling a little bit more pain like a lot of people are expecting in January. So in GDX last week, we had a buyer of 11,000 of the June 40 calls. It was 28.50 at the time. Now it's trading almost 30, a little over 29. And they're the January 13th, 31 calls that they're buying for 40 cents, buying 5,000 of those. Not as big as I'd like to see, but as I was digging into this and I saw, well, shoot, last week they bought 11,000 of these June 40s. I like to see that kind of paper continue to flow like it is, John. I think somebody thinks that gold, maybe the miners have a little bit of upside. I like what we're seeing here. I think GDX is a good way to play this if you're looking for an alternative.
Yep, I agree, Pete. And I would say that we are that far, folks, from a quadruple top or whatever. If you draw a line across basically 29.75 or so, if we can break above that, that becomes support. I'm not the greatest technician in the world, never claimed to be. But Pete and I, even though we might not invest based on technicals, we pay attention when somebody like AJ Monte from our team says, take a look at this support level. In this case, it's been resistance just above. And if we break through that, we're going to go a lot higher, and that's going to be support. So keep an eye on that key level, basically 29.75 to 30, Pete, right in that area.
Yeah. Yep. Absolutely.
Well,
so it's interesting. Go ahead.
What do you got as far, other than JJ Watt announcing his retirement, Pete, which was a little bit of a shocker, even though he's playing out the string on a losing team now. Mm-hmm. And I kind of feel bad for him, but if he stayed in Houston, it would still be the same story.
Yeah, It would be brutal. JJ, the greatest part about that guy, John, just real briefly, is you and I both know the story. A lot of people maybe don't know the story, but here's a guy who's this big human being in Wisconsin, and he's delivering pizzas and for Domino's. And some guy says, hey, man, what are you doing delivering pizzas for Domino's? You ought to be playing football. Voila. The guy becomes a football player at the University of Wisconsin and has an unbelievable career. Now it's over. The last year or two hasn't been great for him, but he gets to settle it out in Arizona. It doesn't sound so bad to me, John. No. Seems like a pretty good gig.
What else do you got, Pete, as far as sports? And again, our best to both Franco, who unfortunately passed away at the end of last week, just before his team played their hearts out for him, Pete, on the game that they were retiring his number. You waited too long, Pittsburgh, to do that. Anyway, what else do you got, Pete, as far as sports?
I got this for you, John. How about when you're looking at the NFL right now? Can you remember a year where we've had more parity than we have now? And I think that's true college football, and I think we could say the same thing about the NFL. In the past, it's always just been, well, you know what? It's this team and this team. I don't think that's the way it works this year. We've watched teams go up, come down a little bit, go back up again. Some of them have been locked in all year, obviously Philly and Buffalo, but I'm going to read off to you. This is the list of teams that are still in the playoff hunt. it's basically the entire AFC and NFC. But Buffalo, Miami, the Patriots, Jets, Cincy, Baltimore, Pittsburgh, Jacksonville, Tennessee, KC, the Chargers, and the Raiders are all still in the picture for the AFC, John. In the NFC, Philly, Dallas, Giants, Washington, Minnesota, Detroit, Green Bay, Tampa, Carolina, New Orleans, San Francisco, Seattle. All of those teams in the NFC still in the picture for the playoffs. Now, some of them are absolutely in. Vikings in, Philly in, Buffalo in, Cincy in. But after that, you've got a whole war going on. I don't remember a year anything like this. I will give you my top three, and you probably will agree, John, but Buffalo, KC, Cincinnati in the AFC. And in the NFC, I'd say it's Philadelphia, Minnesota, and San Francisco. Minnesota does not have a defense, but that offense just seems to click whenever they really need to. And if that happens through the playoffs, John, they could really make a deep run as well.
Well, and I agree with that, Pete, but the only one I'll take exception with is San Francisco. I know Purdy has done great. And, I love when Mr. Irrelevant becomes extremely relevant. And as Groucho Marx would say, irrelevant, there's lots of irrelevance in the circus.
Oh,
but I think that this is a very talented guy, played at Iowa State, Pete?
Yep.
And I give him all the credit in the world for fighting his way onto the team, and now for being the guy that's, they're hanging their, they've hitched their horse to that wagon to try to pull them into the playoffs. I still think the Giants might be this far ahead of that, though, Pete. Mm-hmm. So I would say the Giants, and I'm surprised by the Green Bay defense because they've really saved Aaron Rodgers a few times this year. And for them to come back against Miami like that, a talented Miami team, and to keep them to such a low scoring deal in that game, I think that's something that really, I wouldn't count Green Bay out as long as they've got last year's MVP on the team.
Yep, he's been a stud all year, John. He's had some downs, but mostly ups, and he's had a lot of struggles with other players and so forth, and injuries. And the offensive line has always hurt for him, but they're still right there. They still have a shot. And who would have thought that even just a couple weeks ago? You're looking at this team, you're like, God, Green Bay, those guys aren't even going to make the playoffs. They're not far off. The one thing about the Niners, though, John, they have the best defense in football. I mean, bar none. That keeps them in games. And Purdy, as long as he doesn't throw interceptions, and he's only thrown 3, as long as he doesn't throw interceptions, that team still has enough people on offense. And Purdy almost seems like he's coming into his own. That pass to Kittle the other day was just perfect. And then he's got McCaffrey. And, he's like, they've got a running game. They've got a nice passing game. They've got some great athletes. And Purdy doesn't have to necessarily win. He's not a game manager. I think he's even better than a game manager, actually. But he just needs to not turn over the ball. If he doesn't do that with that defense, they always have a shot. So here's the next one, John. We're going to jump to college football because this one you're going to love. I love just kind of doing the research, trying to find fun stuff that nobody else is talking about. So who, in your opinion, is winning the world with the portal? And the portal, for people who don't know, in college football, just call it free agency. It's no longer college football anyway. College football, these guys got NFT money. Some of them are making $3 million a year. So these are no longer amateur athletes. And now they've got the free agency through the portal. And any guy can quit and just, I get it. You want to be able to play. You want to be able to transfer. I get all of that. We all understand that. But, John, the way they're using the portal is it's just free agency for college football. But who would you guess, and this is near and dear to you, do I think, and who you most likely will think, has had the most success with the portal, or at least in the top 5?
Well, you mentioned USC right at the beginning of the year, Pete, and you're absolutely right because, they got Lincoln Riley and they got Caleb Huey, Heisman Trophy winner and all that. So you'd have to say they're near the top for all the people they got in. But as far as this year, for the upcoming, I've already seen Georgia signing everybody. I mean, they got the number 1 wide receiver from Missouri, Pete. They've been getting guys transferring in like crazy, and for good reason. They're undefeated. They look like they're a shoe-in for national champ. And, I think people want to play for a winner. So
Yep.
that's where you're going to get noticed. I'd say it's Georgia, Pete. Who is it?
Well, your top teams right now are schools. I can call them teams actually because it is pro football. It just is a different version of pro football. But Florida State, Michigan, UCLA, USC, Arizona State, Oregon, Oklahoma State, Miami. Georgia did make that signing, but you know what's interesting, John? When you look at it, Alabama's losing more players than they're gaining, and I would bet you that Georgia's somewhere in the same ballpark. Here's why. You get these great recruits, but they want to play, and they got somebody better than them in front of them. So they're like, you know what? I'm out of here. And you're seeing a lot of that. But the one that's near and dear to both of us, but particularly you, Colorado. They got a 5-star, they got 2 4-stars, they got 6 3-star guys signing up with Prime Time. And who could blame them? Because you've got Coach Prime going out there and telling these guys, you know what? You want to win? You want to prove you can win? Come with me. They've gone from a team that had nobody, and they were terrible. You saw them firsthand, although you saw the only game they won when they beat Cal. But John, they've gone out there. They're the number 29 national recruiter this year, which is a number they haven't seen since 1981 or something like that. They've landed 14 high school kids. They got guys that were going to go to Notre Dame. They're coming over and they're coming to Colorado. You got junior college guys. They were going to go to Auburn. Now they're going to Colorado. So they're doing it with the high school guys, some of the junior college guys, but within the portal, they are absolutely digging up some huge gems. And I wouldn't be surprised if he's got these guys moving in a really different direction than what we've seen from the Buffs in a really long time. I can't wait for this fall just to see what goes on. And I guarantee you, ESPN will be at Colorado for the spring game. I just guarantee you right now.
I agree, Pete, because he's Dion. He's Neon Dion. He's Coach Prime. He's still the only guy to hit a home run and get a kick return in the same week for a touchdown. The only man. And that includes, obviously, your pal, Bo Jackson, another great two-sport guy. These are the last two-sport guys that really could make a difference. And for him to get the focus on the Colorado Buffs, Pete, is a big deal for Colorado. And, they play in a real league, given that the kids are absolutely nuts for that team anyway. They pack the stadium even when they lose. So that's pretty impressive. I get what you're saying about, and it makes a lot of sense that people would want to go to the school where they're going to play. And if they see other really good recruits in front of them, back in the day, you'd have Alabama with, 3 potential starting quarterbacks and, they're alternating between them. Those guys don't want to alternate. They want to start and dominate. And if they can't do it there for whatever reason, and look at some of the guys that have moved on, Pete, when you look at the Cincinnati quarterback, he was at Ohio State and then had to transfer down to LSU to basically become the Heisman Award winner. When you've got Joe Burrow doing that, and that was in the old days when he had to sit out to do it, Pete. Yeah. Now they're eligible immediately. That is a game changer. The money is a game changer, but also being eligible immediately is a game changer.
And I'll tell you, we're going to get Joe Burrow on here, John. We've talked to him. He's interested. Got to go through his agent, even though we know him. He's a great guy, but his brother Jamie's a phenomenal guy as well. Has a great restaurant in Omaha, Nebraska. He played football at Lincoln. That was another huge mistake. Joe Burrow wanted to play for the Nebraska Cornhuskers, and they didn't want him. Scott Frost. That was the beginning of the end. And I love Scott Frost. He's a great guy. He really is. Good man. But he made a lot of mistakes when he was the head coach at Nebraska. And that was probably the biggest one, because had they had Joe Burrow at quarterback, that team might have won quite a few more games, John, before he ended up going into the NFL that's my humble prediction.
Yeah, I agree. Well, folks, we appreciate you joining us today. The first trading day after the Christmas holiday and so forth. Keep in mind that event that we're talking about and that we preview the show with in San Diego You can find out all about it by going to marketrebellion.com/SD for San Diego, which, by the way, Pete, is where the founder of ServiceNow, Fred Luddy, that's where he lives. I said, "You're in God's country, man."
Yeah.
And he said, "Oh, don't I know it?" So check
Except
out.
for the taxes.
Yeah, except for the taxes. marketrebellion.com/SD, 2 days of live trading. Ask anybody, check out the website for reviews and so forth. Everybody loves that. Pete and I will be back tomorrow, 1 p.m. Eastern Time, for another Rebel's Edge.